10,000 years ago, a human being looked at a wolf, one of the most dangerous predators on the planet, and somehow turned it into a golden retriever. They looked at wild cattle the size of small cars with horns that could kill a man and turn them into dairy cows. They looked at wild horses that had never been touched by human hands and decided those were going to carry people across continents. Our ancestors pulled off one of the strangest tricks in the history of life on Earth. They reached into the wild and reshaped entire species to fit human civilization. And then, around 10,000 years ago, they basically stopped, which raises a question that sounds simple but goes genuinely deep. Have we already domesticated everything worth domesticating? Or is there an animal alive right now, walking around somewhere in the wild, that is quietly on its way to becoming the next dog? The answer is yes. And scientists already know which animal it probably is. Before we get to the answer, we need to understand why domestication is so incredibly rare. Because people confuse two things all the time: taming and domestication, and they are not the same thing at all. A tiger raised by humans from birth can become tame. It might tolerate people, follow you around, even seem genuinely affectionate. But that tiger is still a tiger. Domestication is something completely different. Domestication happens when an entire species changes genetically across many generations, when the animal's biology, behavior, and psychology permanently rewire themselves to be compatible with human life. And that process is almost impossibly difficult to trigger. Take zebras. For centuries, people have tried to domesticate them. On paper, zebras seem perfect, similar size to horses, strong enough to ride, live in social groups found across an entire continent. Yet domesticated zebras basically don't exist. The reason is that zebras are aggressive, unpredictable, and panic under pressure in ways that make selective breeding nearly impossible. The traits that made horses useful simply aren't there. And that's the fundamental problem. Most species fail the domestication test for reasons that aren't obvious from the outside. Some are too aggressive. Some panic and shut down when confined. Some refuse to breed in captivity. Some have social structures that don't allow humans to insert themselves as a dominant figure. Historian and biologist Jared Diamond spent years analyzing why certain animals were domesticated and others weren't, and his conclusion was stark: only a tiny fraction of large animal species on Earth possess the right combination of traits for domestication. The window is extraordinarily narrow, which means our ancestors, in all likelihood, already found most of the animals that could work. But probably not all of them. And that one exception is where this story gets genuinely fascinating. In 1959, a Soviet geneticist named Dmitry Belyaev launched one of the most extraordinary experiments in the history of science. His goal was elegantly simple: take wild silver foxes and breed only the friendliest ones. That's it. No other criteria. Not size, not intelligence, not appearance. Just select the individuals that were least afraid of humans, breed them together, and repeat generation after generation and see what happens. What happened shocked everyone, including Belyaev himself. Within just a few generations, the foxes didn't just become friendlier, they started physically transforming. Their ears went floppy, their tails began to curl upward, their coats developed new color patterns, patches of white, spotted markings that had never appeared in wild foxes. Their skulls changed shape slightly, their stress hormone levels dropped permanently, and then came the behavior that nobody expected. They started acting like dogs. They sought out human attention. They whined when people left the room. They wagged their tails when someone approached. They brought objects to their human handlers like they were playing fetch. In a few decades, an absolute eye blink, in evolutionary terms, a wild predator had begun the journey towards something that looked and behaved remarkably like a pet. The experiment is still running today, more than 65 years later, and the foxes have only continued transforming. What Belyaev accidentally proved is something profound: that domestication isn't a slow, grinding, random process requiring thousands of years of luck. It's a switch. Select for one trait, tameness, and the animal's entire biology starts reorganizing itself around that choice, which is almost certainly exactly what happened with wolves 10,000 years ago. The fox experiment didn't just produce friendly foxes, it revealed the underlying mechanism of domestication itself. When you select for reduced fear and aggression toward humans, you're selecting for animals with lower baseline stress responses. And lower stress responses are controlled by hormones, specifically by how much cortisol and adrenaline the animal produces. When you breed for that, you get animals that are calmer, more curious, more playful for longer into adulthood, more socially flexible. And once those hormonal changes are in play, Everything else, the physical appearance, the behavior, the social attachment follows almost automatically. This is called neoteny, the retention of juvenile traits into adulthood. Domesticated animals across almost every species look and act younger than their wild counterparts. Dogs compared to wolves look like wolf puppies that never fully grew up. The floppy ears on the Russian foxes are literally a feature of juvenile foxes that normally disappears as they mature, but in the domesticated line, it stays. Belayev's foxes showed that this same process can be triggered deliberately, quickly, and reliably. Which is why if you asked any serious biologist today which animal is the strongest candidate for future domestication, the answer would almost certainly be the fox, because we've already demonstrated the process works. The genetics respond. The behavior responds. The physical traits respond. Everything that needs to happen has already been shown to happen. The fox is not a future possibility. In a very real scientific sense, it is already in progress. Here is the part of this story that most people have never considered, and it might be the most interesting part of all. While scientists were running controlled fox experiments in laboratories, something completely unplanned was happening in the outside world. Animals were starting to domesticate themselves. Urban foxes across Europe and North America have, over just a few decades, developed measurably different behavior from their rural counterparts. They're less fearful of humans, more willing to approach, more tolerant of close proximity, better at reading human body language and behavior. Nobody bred them for this. Nobody selected them. They just figured out that being less afraid of humans made city life significantly easier. More food, less competition, more shelter, and the individuals with those traits survived and reproduced at higher rates. Crows have learned to recognize individual human faces and will remember a specific person who threatened them for years, warning other crows about that person. Some crow populations have learned to use traffic patterns to crack open nuts, placing nuts on crosswalks, waiting for cars to run them over, then retrieving the food during the red light. Raccoons in urban environments have been shown in studies to solve complex puzzles significantly faster than their rural counterparts, apparently because living around humans selects for problem-solving flexibility at an accelerated rate. These animals are adapting to human civilization in real time, right now, without any human direction. Which raises a possibility that is genuinely a little mind-bending. Maybe the next domesticated animal won't be chosen by us at all. Maybe it's already choosing us. This has happened before. The most vivid example is the one hiding in plain sight in most people's homes right now: cats. Contrary to what most people assume, humans didn't domesticate cats the way we domesticated dogs or horses. We didn't capture wild cats, breed the friendly ones, and create a domestic species through deliberate selection. Cats domesticated themselves. When early farming societies developed around 10,000 years ago, grain storage attracted rodents. Rodents attracted wild cats. Wild cats got effortless food. Humans got free pest control. The cats that were least afraid of humans got the most food and survived best. Over time, both species drifted toward each other without either one making a conscious decision about it. The result was the house cat, not really a domesticated animal in the traditional sense, more a wild animal that decided a long time ago that civilization was convenient and has been exploiting that decision ever since. And if cats did it once, there is no biological reason another species couldn't do it again. The process is not closed. Evolution did not stop when the last cow was domesticated. Species are adjusting to human environments right now, in cities, in suburbs, in the edges of agricultural land, and somewhere in that adjustment, the same cascade that turned wolves into dogs and wild cats into house cats could be quietly beginning again. Here's what the entire history of domestication actually reveals when you step back and look at the full picture. It was never really about humans controlling animals. Every species we call domesticated today, dogs, cats, horses, cattle, pigs, they didn't become domesticated because humans overpowered them or outsmarted them. They became domesticated because the relationship worked for both sides. Wolves became dogs because wolves that cooperated with humans ate better, stayed warmer, and raised more offspring than wolves that didn't. Cats stayed near humans because the food supply was reliable and the competition was lower. The animals that made it through the filter of domestication weren't the strongest or the most impressive. They were the ones capable of finding value in a relationship with us. And that pattern, that logic hasn't changed. It still applies right now, today, to every species that is slowly learning to live alongside 7 billion humans in a rapidly urbanizing world. So what animal will humans domesticate next? The most scientifically grounded answer is Fox is the experiment has already been run, the results are already in, and the only thing missing is the cultural decision to commit to the process. But the more fascinating answer, the one that keeps researchers genuinely excited, is that the real next domesticated animal may already be out there, living in a city somewhere, eating from a bin, watching humans with those sharp, adaptive eyes, learning, and slowly, generation by generation, becoming something new. If this changed the way you think about the animals around you, subscribe. See you there.